Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Kelly Sendek. I'm the marketing manager here at Unique Venues. And today I'm going to introduce you to our presenter, Katrina Mbaye. She is from the National Housing Center, and she will be presenting on the topic of rethinking event spaces for accessibility and inclusivity. Just to introduce who Katrina is, I'll give a little bio about her. She is the Assistant Vice President of National Housing Center. It's an award-winning conference venue in the heart of Washington, D.C. Under her leadership, the National Housing Center went from hosting 1 to 2 groups a week to being booked solid 10 months of the year. She's a seasoned leader with 20 years of experience working in the nonprofit sector as both a meeting planner and a venue manager. So, with that, I will pass it over to Katrina.
Thank you, Kelly. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me this afternoon to talk about rethinking event spaces for accessibility and inclusivity. I'm going to start with a little story. About 12 years ago, I had my youngest child. The difference between this one and my older children is that I was not able to stay home for a year with this baby. I had been working hard to grow professionally, and I didn't want to lose the momentum that I had in my career. In all honesty, I wasn't even financially able to stay home anymore for a whole year. So, despite returning to work, I was determined to breastfeed this child, just as I had done with the others. At the time, I worked at a child welfare foundation. And half of my role was meeting planning. And I did about 50 meetings a year. And I traveled all over the country for these meetings. Many of my colleagues were social workers, so it was a welcome surprise when I got back to the office 12 weeks after maternity leave to return to an office with a playpen and a rocking chair waiting for me in my office. I was told I could bring the baby whenever I truly needed to, and I felt so privileged to work with such caring people. But there was no privacy room. I was able to put flip chart paper on my windows and put up a pumping in session sign whenever I needed to. But whenever I was traveling for my events, there was no place to nurse. And this was before it was cool to have nursing mothers' rooms everywhere. So oftentimes I was either in the back of my rental car or in a supply closet somewhere or even in an airport bathroom. About this time, I was offered a promotion. And that meant a substantial salary bump for my family, along with the bigger title. But it also meant that I would have to increase my travel. Ultimately, I ended up declining that promotion offer, and I left the organization that I loved just 1 year later, where I wasn't required to travel. But the trade-off there was that I had a lower salary than than the promotion that I turned down earlier. And I've always wondered, what would it have meant to my career if I had a nursing mother's room more available to me during all of my travels to events? While it may sound as if I'm simply stating the obvious challenges faced by all working mothers across the globe, what I'm really speaking about is accessibility and inclusivity. For me personally, accessibility and inclusivity means removing the barriers of full participation. But in terms of meetings and events, it's the act of creating an environment that fosters a sense of belonging for all guests of your venue or your meeting. Of course, this is going to look differently from venue to venue, depending on where you are in the country, the demographics of the groups that your venue hosts, or your event goals if you're a meeting planner. Thanks for joining me today to explore new ways of thinking about accessibility and inclusivity. As mentioned, I'm Katrina Mbaye, and I manage the National Housing Center located in downtown DC. Like many venues, the venue is part of a larger organization. In this case, it's the National Association of Home Builders, a nonprofit trade association that represents the largest network of craftsmen, innovators, and problem solvers dedicated to building and enriching communities. That's a mouthful. We have over 140,000 members, and our annual conference draws over 80,000 in-person attendees and 1,100 exhibitors annually. Our venue is located in the NAHB headquarters office, which is, again, in downtown DC. It was actually built to accommodate our meetings, but it's not big enough to accommodate our meetings anymore because we've got 1,700 board members now. So we actually rent other places just to have our own board members. We are booked solid just about 10 months of the year. I spend a large part of my time managing the day-to-day operations of the housing center, but I'm also a mother and a wife, a sister and a daughter, and a proud community member in our nation's capital. And because of all these identities and a professional career spending a lot of time as a meeting planner and then as a venue manager, I am uniquely tuned into the front and back end of the events machinery. I've learned that the attendee experience is what makes or breaks the success of an event and your overall business. When your guests feel welcomed, considered, and cared for, business begins to chase you and not the other way around. Prioritizing accessibility and inclusivity is a key way to achieve increased revenue and attendee satisfaction. So, my hope today during our time together is to accomplish these three goals. I aim to encourage you to think about accessibility and inclusivity as more than just meeting ADA requirements. I also want you to find one new practical way to make your venue more accessible and inclusive. And then I want you to understand how your action will make a big difference in the long run, no matter where you start. So, access versus inclusivity. Now, we're just talking about ADA. Title III requires you to meet certain requirements to ensure accessibility for people with disabilities. Now, remember how the law works. It only outlines the minimum requirement for access in most cases, but access does not necessarily mean inclusivity. So, going back to my personal story, I certainly had access to a job that I loved, but the decision to nurse my child created a barrier that excluded me from professional advancement. Inclusivity would have been the act of removing that barrier so that I could participate fully in accessing the professional advancement I earned in spite of my decision to breastfeed my baby. So let's make it a little more practical. This is access. This is you, if you're in a wheelchair, having access to get into a building. This is inclusivity. What real accessibility and inclusivity looks like is considering and talking out loud about things that make us feel a little uncomfortable. I wonder if anybody on today's webinar got a tinge of discomfort when I said breastfeed, or even just saying the word breast for that matter. We're going to need to get comfortable talking about things that might bring a little discomfort if we want to have success in this area. So, many guests to your venues and events are experiencing real life. So my teenage daughter says to me, "Mom, life be lifing sometimes." For example, menopause. Menopause is a real thing, and anyone who has seen somebody experiencing a hot flash has witnessed it. I've seen a lot of people in our venue with the look of this woman right here. If your venue tends to host a lot of events with seasoned professionals, you may want to consider having a cooling room. Another area where more support is needed is in this area right here. Many people are living with neurodivergence who are prone to sensory overload. Having a quiet room available to which they can retreat for a moment is the difference between participating fully and leaving early. I have several colleagues now that are caring for elderly parents, and caretakers call them. Sometimes they just need a place to retreat and collect themselves before returning to the conference. We also live in the best country in the world because we have such rich diversity in our citizens. So this also means diversity in religious observations. So having an appropriate multi-faith prayer room can make or break your venue. This experience for guests when there's no place to practice their faith at the appropriate time might cause some people not to participate in your conference or skip days altogether. And no conversation would be complete without talking about dietary needs. Okay, so guys, this is an area where I'm not sure if we're the solution or part of the problem. This area here has the potential to go off the rails. And to be clear, there is a difference between preferences and dietary needs. So if someone were to set your great grandmother's photo album on fire, for example, would Fiji water really only be acceptable, or would Deer Park water be okay? So in this area, I've spent a lot of time researching a lot of different milk options. I'm saying milk options, not like lactose free or organic milk, soy milk or almond milk or oat milk, but people are asking now for hemp milk and cashew milk. I even had somebody ask me about goat's milk and sheep's milk, and I really wish that I was kidding. I don't know if the rest of you are going through this, but this is what we go through. So let's get back to our goals. The first one is encouraging you to think about accessibility and inclusivity as more than just meeting ADA requirements, but as part of your business plan and your event goals. So all venues ought to be meeting all fire code and ADA and OSHA requirements. If you're not up to code in any one of those areas, that's the first dragon that you need to slay. So we're going to assume that everyone in attendance either works at a venue or works with venues that are up to code for your state. But you need to ask yourself, how can you frame your event space to be more inclusive? If you're not coming up with any answers, try walking the space one day and pretend you are a visitor looking around with new eyes. If you didn't know where you were going already, would the directional signs have been helpful to you? If you had vision challenges, would you have been able to locate these signs? Could you easily locate the bathrooms? Can you see the defibrillator or the emergency exits? Try providing feedback surveys and ask the question, is there anything we could have done today to make our event or our venue more inclusive or accessible for you or a friend today? Host a meet and greet with some of your industry colleagues or your personal network and have a conversation about this topic. Ask what they think and provide the questions ahead of time so that they can be thoughtful with their answers. Oftentimes, just asking the question is a great place to start. So here's some concrete options to consider if you haven't already. Obviously, I'm a fan of having a nursing mother's room, right? Or a privacy room, if it makes sense for your venue or your event. But cooling rooms are also something that's needed. And people experiencing symptoms from menopause might need it, but also people have anxiety attacks. Or if you have an event with a lot of speakers, you have a lot of people presenting, people get pre-speaking jitters. And if you ever see a man in a full suit and a tie just before he's speaking, he's got any sort of stage fright, it doesn't take long for sweaty armpits to take over. He would love to have access to a cooling room. If you put a mini fridge and some cold water in there, they're good to go. So when you're supporting those with special needs, quiet rooms or meditation rooms where attendees can retreat when they're experiencing any sort of overload is a nice option. Be sure to consider the lighting in these spaces because fluorescent lighting is not good. Think instead about lamps, table lamps, or plug-in candles and swap out all fluorescent bulbs with warm lighting. It is important not to give up too soon in this area when you're creating these spaces. So you might wish that you could do something like this in your venue. But all you really have to do to make a huge difference is this. A quiet office, even a large closet would do if someone needs a space. Talking about religious observation. If you're able to carve out a multi-faith prayer room, throw some mats in there with a large carpet that's only used for this purpose. That means that no one wearing shoes has walked on it. That would be good enough. Also think about doing things like having a food-free lounge retreat so that when your larger group breaks for breaks, people can go to this place with no food in sight, people who might be fasting for Lent or for Ramadan during the meal breaks. And this is a great place to set out some fun reading materials or a few games that they can play with each other. Now, let's go back to dietary concerns. I think most of us are pretty well versed with vegetarian or vegan, but consider kicking it up a notch. Maybe dairy-free or gluten-free options. Think about nut-free and pork-free options, low sodium, diabetic-friendly and soy-free options. And again, make kosher and halal and Lent options available for people with religious observation. And given the popularity of plant-based diets, you might want to be more thoughtful about making sure that vegan and vegetarian options aren't just a salad or a pasta bowl. Their protein needs for these diets are just the same as meat eaters. And we need to make sure that they've got enough protein and nutritionally balanced food in those meals as well. So for goal number 2, to find a practical way to make your venue more accessible and inclusive, it's really important that you're creative here. We live in the real world and things feel a bit unsettled right now. If you're hearing that in DC, we've got the National Guard in our streets right now outside. And there are things such as budget constraints and limited space. I've seen groups tightening their belts, as many of you have, because they're nervous about their registration numbers right now. This means we venues can offer a lot of value to them by addressing accessibility and inclusivity concerns on our end. So when I started at my venue a little over 8 years ago, I was told very plainly, there's no space for a nursing mother's room anywhere in the venue. On the surface, that was true. I thought about sacrificing some of our premium event space and bringing in some Mamaval pods. I don't know if you guys remember those, but they're these freestanding private pods that you can see at airports or convention centers. At the time, those were more than $15,000 a pod. I don't know what they are today, but the costs that made that not an option for us. But there was an old, forgotten about tiny office turned storage closet just off our loading dock. It was grungy. However, this storage space had a heavy noise-reducing door, a working thermostat, a window buried behind years' worth of boxes of junk, 2 working electrical outlets, decades worth of dust, and a lot of spiders. It was just the diamond in the rough that I was looking for. I got those boxes cleared out, and no one working less than 25 years at NAHB could tell me anything about the stuff that was in that room. After that, I had the housekeeping team give it a good cleaning and the engineers put on a coat of paint. I got an area rug from Amazon. I repurposed 2 sofa chairs from our executive office that nobody was using anyway. Put a mini fridge in there, threw in some comfy pillows, and there you have it. Here you see the results of a privacy room, all for the cost of a can of paint, some pillows, and an area rug. Another example of using your space creatively concerns common areas. Other than our lobby, we had no common areas in our venue when I started. Our venue is lucky to have the gorgeous atrium you saw earlier with 4-story glass walls. This allows tons of light to come in, and we're able to have a lot of live plants and enjoy a weatherproof feeling of being outside. So I was kind of confused why we didn't have any place to just hang out. I later learned it was because they wanted to have groups have as much flexibility to use that space as possible. But I saw an opportunity to create some common areas for both groups renting the space and also for the 250 some people we had working in the upper stairs for our organization. So I ended up creating what we call the NHC Lounge. All I did was I brought in some patio umbrellas, I rearranged some plants, threw in some bistro tables and chairs we already had in our inventory, and then I had coffee house music piped in through the speakers, and it was an instant hangout spot. Carving out this space brought an energy to our atrium, which shows really well during site visits. This space is where people can bring their lunch, take a phone call, meet with a colleague, and network with a fellow attendee. I purposely created the lounge to be easily removable, but less than a couple groups asked to break it down annually. Since creating this space, we now host a monthly barista bar for a whole building, and anyone is welcome to come and grab a free hot beverage. We even have event groups sell the lounge as a sponsorship opportunity by allowing a vendor to apply their company branding to the space. We can bring out monitors and they can have a company video or a slide deck. And now the group has monetized the setup that was already in place at no additional cost to them. We later created 2 more common areas in our venue for those seeking a quieter area because the lounge gets pretty busy now. But this is one of them. Creating all these areas accomplished a few things. It welcomed people who work in the building to enjoy the event space alongside outside groups, whereas before there was little to no access to the event space because it was either in use by an outside group or there was nowhere to sit. It created areas for event attendees to retreat to network and to check email or simply to sit and have a personal moment. It also created an additional revenue stream for groups renting the space by way of sponsorship opportunities at no additional cost to them. In both examples, I used spaces we already had in a new way. There was little out of pocket cost to us, but they made a big impact. So let's think about your own venue or your event. When you look around the space or consider the people who will be in attendance in the space, are there some new but practical ways that you can make them feel welcomed, considered, or cared for? This could be super simple. It might just be something like having a charging station. Everybody has charging stations, but are there enough cords for those who are traveling and maybe they didn't bring their charging cord or they lost it or left it at the hotel? Do you have coat racks or boot racks available that you could put out in an area if you have cold winters where you are? Keeping a box of greeting cards on hand so if someone needs a happy birthday or a congratulations card, they don't have to find the nearest Walgreens. Now, if you're feeling really adventurous, you can think about things like having some wider, sturdier chairs for heavier than average guests. And you want to be tasteful in areas like this. You want to be discreet. They shouldn't be a different color or pattern as the chairs that everyone else is using. Having at least one gender neutral bathroom if that's something that's desirable in your neck of the woods. Another thing you can do is have some personal hand fans available for those experiencing hot flashes. And one thing every venue or event should always have, if you're a planner, you should ask the venue if they have one, is a wheelchair in their inventory, should the need arise for one. So we're at our third and final goal now, and that's understanding how your actions make a big difference in the long run, no matter where you start. So for those who may be needing a place to make a difficult phone call away from the crowds, or who need a quiet space to allow their sensory overload to dissipate, who are observing Lent or Ramadan, would like a place to pray for a few minutes, or just looking for a chair that makes them feel confidently supported. A person who needs a clean and appropriate place to pump. These small intangible things make all the difference in their personal experience. It shows them that you've taken the time to welcome them, that you've taken the time to consider them, and that you care about their experience in your venue or your event. These actions will make the difference in the long run, no matter where you start. So most of us don't want barriers to participation for other people, but oftentimes those who have the ability to break down barriers don't notice them, or they don't tap into their creativity to tackle them. It's not out of malice those barriers are there. We often just don't know how to discuss things that can bring discomfort. We also normalize certain barriers. But when you take steps, even baby ones, to address barriers to participation, people notice. Even the people who themselves weren't experiencing those barriers take notice. And these are the people who share their experiences with others about your venue or your conference. They'll recommend your space or your organization, and they'll be repeat attendees and clients year after year. So with that, I want to say thank you to everybody for joining us today. Thank you to Unique Venues for allowing me to present on this very personal and sometimes uncomfortable topic. And I'm wondering if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Katrina. That was a great presentation. And as we give a few seconds and minutes here for people to ask their questions if they have any, I'm going to release a survey just to get the audience's feedback so that we can continue to host webinars that are relevant to the audience. So for the attendees, you'll be receiving a survey right now. And I'll leave that up for the duration of this question and answer period if anyone has any questions. But Katrina, I certainly learned a lot from your experience. I definitely appreciate all of the insight that you provided.
Thank you.
And we'll stay on for another minute here if no one else has any questions. Oh, I see a question came in. Will this be recorded and sent out? Yes, it will. If not by the end of today, expect it to come out tomorrow. We have another question here. This person says, you made some really great suggestions on special accommodations. When we don't have the space for all, how do we choose? Nursing room, neurodivergent space, cooling room, and prayer room.
So I think it's really important to consider the demographics. Um, I know for us, a lot of our business is repeat business. So we really get to know the folks that are coming to groups. If you are an event planner, I think people know the people that are coming to their group. So if you've got an event that is predominantly men. So we've got a lot of defense groups and they are mostly male. And I only could choose one. I probably would not do too many nursing mothers rooms, like maybe make a privacy room that can double as a meditation slash nursing room. And that way you can kind of feed two birds with one hand, as my son would say, because we don't kill birds with stones anymore. But the neurodivergence one, us being in DC, we have a very diverse, we have a lot of different people from all walks of life, and I do feel like neurodivergence is really, really high. That's something that we get a lot of feedback on from people saying that they were really appreciative that we had a space that they could retreat to just because of the sensory overload. So that one ranks pretty high, but it does depend on the types of groups that you have. If you're a venue where you're doing a lot of weddings and galas and social events, probably not so much on the neurodivergence because you're not going to have like people coming in like a corporate type of setting. I hope that answers your question. Ask a follow-up if I didn't give you what you need.
We have another question here. This person says, I know you mentioned revenue streams through sponsorship opportunities, but if the group doesn't have sponsors, do you think it is okay to charge a fee for these rooms?
Absolutely. So I started out by saying that our venue is part of NAHB and we're a nonprofit trade association. So I'm actually in a situation that I don't have a tremendous amount of pressure to meet sales quotas, okay? Because I work for NAHB as well, and we've got our own mission. But if your venue or your event is like really revenue focused, then absolutely, this is a value that you're giving to the people who are coming to this event, that you're giving to people who are renting your space, and you absolutely should feel no problems with charging a price for that resource.
Okay, we have another question here. Do you think it's appropriate to ask attendees when they register what special accommodations they may need or desire?
I think it's more than appropriate. I think it's necessary. I think you absolutely should ask people if there's anything that you can do as a planner or a venue to make their experience the best one possible. People appreciate that.
And then someone asked, how do you promote these locations to attendees?
Okay, so this one is actually tricky. So when I first did the cooling room, it's not so much like you can send out a survey that says, "Hey, are you having hot flashes?" So that's a little weird. I know it's a little tricky. So in this area, this is where you can really partner up with your event planner. So the first thing is I'm the venue in this case, And whenever people are coming and they're booking our space, I'm already building that rapport with the event planner, with that team. So that's the first step, making sure that the people who are actually planning all the logistics for this program are aware of these accommodations that you're able to provide as a venue. Now, if you're sitting in the event planner's chair and you're trying to communicate this information to the attendees who are registering, that's where you put it in the registration page. Like, you have a section that says, this event is going to be held at the wonderful such and such resort or convention center or whatever it is. And here's a list of some of the accommodations that we're providing for this event. And that's where you communicate that those things are there. And then, you have to mention the appropriate place that they can go if they need those resources while they're there. Another thing is on the first day of the program, when they're giving their welcome and their housekeeping notes or whatever have you, that's another great opportunity to mention, hey, we don't want you to forget if you need a privacy room, if you need a cooling room, if you need a nursing mother's room, if you're observing Lent or whatever have you, please see Becky for information on where that is. And you can also have signage to these places. You can also reinforce this at the check-in desk or however they're getting their badge or checking in for the program as well.
The next person says, do you think we should be open to every and any event we can book or be more selective? Additionally, should we be willing to come down in our pricing significantly for the meantime while our space gains more popularity?
I think it depends on what your end game is. So, um, we certainly have a threshold at the National Housing Center for what groups we take. We don't welcome any groups that participate in hate speech or anything that's going to incite mass protests, for example. So, in that situation, there are certain groups that we would turn away, right? Now, I do think that when you talk about pricing, and this is where my personal experience comes into play, having been an event planner as long as I did and working with hotels and venues, I remember feeling like I was constantly being hit over the head because if I wanted to bring in my own projector, okay, well, we're going to charge you $500 to bring in your own projector. I mean, like those things were venues like nickel and dime event planners. I remember being so infuriated as the event planner. So I think that if you are providing a service, like for us, we don't have the cheapest room rental in town, but we certainly have the most inclusive, and that is why we're so busy. I don't bring our price down super low, but I also provide upfront pricing so that they know a person booking an event in our venue will know the total dollar amount of their event before it even began. So, as an event planner, I remember praying that once I got the final bill, it was somewhere in the vicinity of what the budget was, right? Which it was wildly different from whatever we talked about before to what it was like after all the pluses was added. So I think that's important to, you're in business to make money. You've got to pay your people. You're probably not a charity, and jobs depend on you staying profitable, right? So build what you need to build to provide the service that you're providing and give the best service possible. But at the same time, if you're able to provide that service and stay profitable and bring your price down, sure, but don't cheat yourself either. It's important to be busy, but if you're giving people a good service at a good, valuable cost, you will stay busy. At least that's been my experience. We're in the nation's capital. If you're in a part of if you're in a region of the country where my daughter goes to school in Iowa, for example, certain areas in Iowa don't have as much event business, right? That's a different thing. I think it also has to do with where you are. But don't give the store away, as my grandmother would tell me.
And one more question here. Do you think it is acceptable to have these rooms located on a different floor from the meeting?
So for us, our venue is located on just one floor. The upper floors are, you need a badge to get up there, right? So that's something that you have to consider with the needs of your building. If you are able to provide these opportunities on a different floor and it doesn't impact the rest of your space, then go for it. I mean, it depends on the limitations of your actual venue. But I don't see anything wrong with as long as you're not sending them to the bowels of the building and they're getting lost and it looks creepy down there. But if you can reasonably provide the accommodation on a different floor, sure.
Awesome. Well, it looks like those are all of the questions. So I think it's safe to say we can wrap up now. Thank you so much, Katrina. This was very informative. I think everyone gained a
Wonderful.
lot of value from it.
Thank you for having me. Have a
Thank
good
you
day,
so much.
everybody.
All right, bye.
Bye.